Trigger sense. My left ear's my bad ear, so I can hear you better on this ear. All right, well, hello everybody. Welcome to Red Tool House. We are way back here, Jeff and I again. If you're wondering who Jeff is, go back to last episode's video where we introduced Jeff. He's a good friend of mine, Forester. I won't go through all the intros again, but we want to talk today about forest management plans. So we're kind of just walking through the woods here, just talking about some of the benefits and some of the elements associated with the timber management plan. So we thought this would be a good video. So Jeff, from a homesteading perspective, why is it a good idea for homesteaders to have a timber management plan, and what is a timber management plan?
Well, a timber forest management plan is generally a 10-year program, but it's a guideline. It's a written guideline with the mapping, with the data that we talked a little bit about prior, as far as the tools we use to gather that data and why we gather that data. But it is the presentation of that analysis of what is in a forest based on that particular landowner's goals. And let me reiterate that it is based on the landowner's goals, not the forester's goals, not the forest industry goals, but what the landowner wants to do with their forest.
Yeah, just got hit in the head with an acorn. So talking about goals, that's a good point, and I think that's maybe where a lot of us, lay people that just have property, kind of miss the mark. We think when a forester comes in, he's just looking at timber to say, okay, this is what we're going to cut down, and we're going to get this much money out of it, and it's money, money, money. But a property owner's goal could be, well, I don't want to cut anything down. I just want this to be the most healthiest, the most vibrant hardwood forest.
Right. And
that is something that even falls within the scope of what you guys do, right?
Absolutely. I think where some landowners might get confused is that, again, and we touched on a little bit prior, is the difference between a procurement forester and a consulting forester or a management forester. A procurement forester job is just to get that timber to the mill per se, at actually the lowest cost possible. A management forester, consulting forester, that's a component. I mean, if the landowner wants it to be, but a bigger component of the management plan is the maximization of the land and the resources, like, again, for their objectives.
Okay.
And whether that's managing for pure white oak, the best quality white oak saw timber, or for an endangered species like cerulean warbler, threatened endangered species, or for a sugar maple production facility.
Okay, well let's argue. There's something there that I think I'd like to maybe take an example of and look. So to our right, to the viewer's left, this is primarily white oak. And in a previous episode, I talked about silvopasture, where I don't know if foresters get into silvopasture, but it's just basically the concept of mixing savanna-like pasture with some cover, some canopy. Mm-hmm. And logically for me, for having hogs, I would like to keep the hickory and the white oak, let them get as prolific as possible, produce tons and tons of acorns and hickory nuts, so my pigs have an opportunity to come through here quickly and just graze on all this good mass that's on the ground, and of course build that protein. So if that was my goal, a forest management plan would come in, and you guys could look at all this and kind of inventory it and say, okay, this is what you should keep, this is what's healthy, this isn't what isn't healthy. Is there more to that? Unpack that for me.
No, no, you're right on tune. Absolutely. You've got a predominant white oak stand here, and absolutely a forest management plan and a forester can tell you exactly how to convert to savanna, silvopasture. It's agroforestry, and agroforestry is it's in much demand, and there's lots of good reasons, because there's lots of good things that come out of it, not just for the landowner, but for the environment and for the agriculture and for the animals and free range and all that. So, but yes, this white oak stand, we would basically tell you how to release. We first want to know what trees you want left and why. So you told me your basic goal is the silvopasture. And so when you're going to release a white oak stand like this, you want the crown is the tree machine, okay? The crown is what drives the condition of the crown. The size of the crown is what drives that tree from the sunlight and photosynthesis, and of course the soils and all that. But we would tell you what white oaks that you want thriving the most. Actually in here I can see that it needs thinned out, some. So when you thin out, we would show you which trees to thin out. Your lower quality that probably aren't ever going to be anything as far as that have stunted crowns. And so when you release, it's called timber stand improvement. So when you can take out what we consider an inferior white oak and then release the crown on a superior white oak, and the growth capacity and the crown capacity is greatly increased after that.
Yeah, so in that situation, just make sure I'm understanding. So if we thin out and you came in and said, okay, here's what you really need to take, Troy, like, yeah, that's a good looking white oak, but because that's got a hole in the side of the stump, then that's probably going to die in a couple years. So that would be one concern. But like you said, a stunted canopy versus something that we take out, and it's going to allow the other trees just to really get an even bigger crown. So my nut production is just going to go through the roof at that point.
Yes.
Excellent.
Yep. Your nut production and tree growth, actually, you'll get a dual benefit out of it.
Okay.
By doing that.
So if we looked at all the pros from that, then we could say, well, not only am I improving the area for my goal of silvopasture, let my pigs come through here, getting better nut production, some of that wood that would be taken out could possibly be marketable, right?
Right.
Yeah, so as a landowner, I've got an opportunity to say, well, I'm going to cut that down anyway. Does that go to my personal sawmill where I'm making barnwood, or does my forester say, well, this stand of trees, what we're taking out, that's valuable enough to take and turn that into cash, which obviously funds some additional efforts I want to do on the homestead. Obviously, a lot of firewood. If I'm a wood burner, then I'm obviously producing great firewood because we've got a lot of white oak that we're taking out. But what does that do when we thin that out? What does that do as far as other ground cover? Do I need to worry about ground cover? Do I need to worry about things coming back? How do I manage that?
Typically, it will it will put a little bit more sunlight on the forest floor. The regeneration, the ground cover is controlled by your seed source that is out there. That will fluctuate based on different factors. One factor being, honestly, your deer population, because the higher your deer population, the more they're going to keep that browse line, they're going to keep it browsed down. So it's based on a lot of things. On this particular site, I don't see a lot of understory regeneration coming back in. Even if you open it up, you've got a good, somewhat, pretty good grass component in there. And you mentioned as far as the savanna type, I'd say your grass would do pretty good without a lot of competing vegetation in there.
And all of us that raise pigs know that if you left the pigs in there long enough, you wouldn't have an undergrowth situation. They're going to take care of all that. Okay, so that's a really good example of a forest management plan for something as simple as silvopasture, or just incorporating pigs in the forest, to say, I don't want to tear a bunch of stuff up. I actually want this to be super vibrant, super healthy, and it's almost a symbiotic relationship there. The trees are growing super strong, the pigs are growing super strong, and everybody's happy in the end there.
Yeah. I mean, you want to create win-wins or win-win wins. And by that, you're generally detrimental to much of anything as far as that goes. And you can get into different layers. Then if you start to layer either a game habitat or a non-game wildlife habitat into the function of what you're doing, then you can do other applications either here or in other areas that will create better habitat for your preferred species, whether it be a cerulean warbler or a rabbit or or what have you. So.
Okay, so I guess it's safe to say that if we're looking at a forest management plan, as you said, that really focuses on the goal of me, the landowner, but from all the benefits from that, it really focuses on what I want to do with the land, maximizing the potential of my land, something I look at and say, well, that's just a steep slope. What really can it do for me? So maximizing that, and of course, increasing property value and increasing potential revenue generated from that piece of land. So there's all kinds of benefits there. Well, from a homesteader, for our viewers that are homesteaders that may say, well, I've only got a couple acres, or I got 10 acres, or I got 2,000 acres. Is there a limit from a forester when you say, well, I don't want to mess with that, or no, that's not worth messing with?
You know, it used to be, back when I first started, that a limit typically from a forestry standpoint was about 10 acres. That's changed, and it's changed for the better. I mean, we've got landowners now that are doing amazing management work on 3 or 4 acres. Some are doing it on, 2 acres. So, I mean, you can do lots of things. It's just, again, based on your goals and objectives. So no, there's really no limit to it anymore.
Okay, well, excellent. Well, I know the big question that everybody would be dying if I didn't ask is, what is the cost? From a homesteader perspective, what would I have to pay a forester to come in? Now, I know that's obviously going to be based upon the scope, but what are the things you look at to determine price in that situation?
Well, and you get into multiple. That's where we talk with a landowner, and that can be a sit down on the porch with them, or that can be by phone, or that any number of ways we provide information. And again, we really drill down on what that landowner, what they're looking to achieve. That's going to drive basically what the scope of their project is. I mean, I've got some landowners, they just want me to spend a day or a half day coming out doing basically a walkthrough evaluation and advise on that, and they take it from there. I've got some landowners that we've been working with for almost 20 years from a management standpoint that are very intense. So the costs initially they're just going to be on our day rates on what we charge either for myself or a forester technician. Generally, I come out on all initial visits as far as the landowner and getting to know the property. So there are costs. There's a cost component to it. Once you get into, if you decide or a landowner that you want a management plan, those are specific costs. Then those are more project-based costs. That cost is roughly going to run you about, depending on what you want, but about $12 to $15 per acre on a price unit, and we can even normally get some cost share grant funds from the Farm Bill and the Forest Service to help offset some of those costs. Okay,
so there's even some subsidies there that may help offset cost of having a professional like you come in. Excellent. So you said a 10-year plan. So in that situation where you come in as a forester and you put a forest management plan together and you give me this 75-page packet or whatever it may be, that's the plan on recommendations of what I should be doing, should not be doing. It's kind of a list of...
Yeah, and I didn't mean to scare you with the 75-page scenario. I mean, there's a lot of and there's a lot of reference material in there. The core of the plan is generally including maps, because there's a big map component of it. There's maps to show your different forests or a property is broken up, especially if it's typically over 30 or 40 acres. That'll be broken up into what we call stands. Those are manageable units, that acreage that pretty well has the same growing conditions and stocking. So we broke those up in, it's called stand management. So the core of about 15 pages includes the stand mapping, property mapping, soils. We go into soil types for growing conditions, and what we call site classes. So the mapping component, and then we go through and we describe the management stand, and then we make recommendations for that stand. And typically a landowner will have 3 to 4 stands. So we'll be we try to keep it, we don't want to get too complicated. I mean, we want to keep it real, and so of the 75 pages, then the rest of it, believe it or not, is reference material on threatened and endangered species, carbon sequestration now, as far as some of the things going on there environmentally wise. Gosh, there's just a lot of information in there.
Okay, so in that list, it's not like, okay, Troy, here's your to-do list for the next 10 years. It's a ton of stuff. It's kind of like a best practices or a guideline overall theory of what needs to be happening on this specific track.
Yeah, there will be specific recommendations. Okay, but it's your option whether or not what you can want to pick and choose from. That's the nice thing about it. There is no, this is not a mandatory. Although you can, get government. Some government grants from the Forest Service. That doesn't mandate you to do any of the specific practices. What what the Forest Service wants through a lot of that cost sharing is for a landowner to know, to have a guideline to better manage their property, therefore improving the environment for everybody. So so that you're not tied in, but you can pick and choose what you want, and you can expand on what most of our landowners do is they'll go through on our recommendations page, and they'll highlight, wow, I like this, not so interested in that, and then we help them expand on what they're most interested in to actually apply on the ground.
Well, man, that is some great information, and while it may seem a little daunting at first, I think if all of us look at this concept and say, okay, if we've got some land that we're not quite sure what we're going to do, we've got a stand of timber or forest area, and you want to find, how do I maximize the use for it? I always think with 100 acres, I'm paying all this taxes, property tax on this land, how do I get it to work the most for me? So if you're thinking that kind of stuff, strongly consider looking at a forest management plan, because it's going to give you a blueprint, going to give you a game plan on how to maximize that. Jeff has enumerated all these benefits: financial, land improvement, environmental issues, all those type of things that can really help you out, and even mentioned that some of the cost to get a forester in can be offset not only through the profitability elements of these management plans, but even through some subsidies that are out there. Is that safe to say?
Yeah, exactly. And one thing that we didn't mention, in West Virginia, and I can't speak for other states, but in West Virginia we have a managed timberland program, which if you have a management plan, you can qualify for reduced property taxes incentive every year. So that's going to save you money. You add that up over a 10-year period, a 15, 20-year period of ownership, it'll save you a lot of money.
It goes a long way.
Yeah.
Well, so Jeff, if people want to ask, want to inquire about some questions, and want to ask you some things, you're open for people sending you some emails or using the website to contact you, aren't they?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So if you want to reach out to Jeff, feel free to go to westvirginialandgroup.com. That's his website. Now, obviously, for forest management plan, you need to be on the ground at some point to see that. So I know a lot of our viewers are international even. So is there a logical circle that you would draw as far as how far you would go out to do a management plan for somebody?
You mean as far as our service area?
Yeah.
We work all West Virginia. Okay. We work eastern Kentucky over to central Kentucky. We work southwestern Virginia. And Ohio, southeastern Ohio. So anywhere in that, it's a pretty big region.
Yeah, that's a lot of forest land. So yeah, if you happen to be in that area and you want to get Jeff involved, then obviously go to westvirginialandgroup.com. If you're not in that area, but you'd still like to maybe ping him with a question, feel free to go to his website and use the contact information there. Well, man, again, appreciate it.
Yep.
Good info.
Yep, thank you.
All right, we'll talk to you guys soon.